PR Connections Radio presents. This episode of Talks with Toy is brought to you by Classy Communications PR and Advertising. Classy Communications provides public relations and marketing solutions for businesses, professionals, and non-profit organizations. They can deliver the true meaning of your business with press releases, social media marketing, web development, email marketing, book publishing, and much more. Wherever your potential clients are, they can help you connect with them. Visit classycommunications.net to learn more about their suite of services that can help your business stand out from the rest. Classy Communications is your solution for business success.
Hello. How are you guys today? And welcome to Talks with Toy with your host, myself, Toy Bohr. How are you guys doing today? Glad that you could be a part of my podcast show today. Today I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to interview myself. Who better knows you than yourself? So anyway, I'm going to do my interview myself, and I'm going to talk about my journey as a writer and a publisher. And I want to first start off with showing you my new book, Behind the Scenes. It's called Celebrity Life Behind the Scenes, and this is book number 15. I have self-published all of my books, and so this particular book, it features 50 celebrities that I have personally met, and I've taken pictures with them. The paperback has black and white pictures. All of the stories pretty much have pictures, my personal pictures that I have taken with the celebrities that I've met. And I have, like some of the stories are just a couple of paragraphs because I didn't really have a relationship with that celebrity. And some of them, like Earth, Wind, and Fire, I traveled with them. I was on the tour bus sometime. I used to babysit for Philip Bailey. So I used to be best friend, his best friend. Me and his wife hung out all the time. Like here, I've met Holly Berry, Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, Patti LaBelle. I mean, it's so many. And so I do stories on each of the celebrities that these 50 that I showcase in my book. So as I say, the paperback, it has black and white pictures. And I also am proud. This is my first hardcover book that I've ever done. And I made this one because I wanted it to be like a coffee table book. This one has color pictures in it of different people. That's me and Anita Baker. She used to spend the night with me. And Peabo Bryson was the first celebrity that I actually snuck backstage. Well, I didn't sneak backstage for him, but that I met. And he was just one of my favorites. And so anyway, this one is an 8.5 by 11. And it has all the different pictures, like I say, that are color. And you can put it on your coffee table and read it. So I'm really proud. My first hardcover, because I figured I wanted to have a book that displayed the pictures in color so you could really see. Also, I have a ebook, and the ebook, that one also has color pictures. So I'm proud of my accomplishments. So let's start off saying how I even got into the writing field. When I was in high school, I had a teacher, my English teacher, Mr. Brookins, and he says he liked my paper that I wrote on Martin Luther King. And so he's like, would you like to get an advanced English? Because I really love your paper. And I was like, I think 11th grade, soon to graduate. So I'm like, is it going to be more work? Do I have to do more? He's like, yeah, more reading, more work. I was like, oh no, never mind. No. And then I remember my mother-in-law used to compliment me all the time. She used to say that I wrote really nice words in the cards, the greeting cards that I would send her. And then another celebrity was Anita Baker. Me and her were best friends. She used to spend the night with me and stuff. And she would be like, you're able to put things down in writing that other people are not able to do that so freely. And so hearing these compliments from people, I just thought anybody can write, anybody can do what I do. So not realizing that I claim it as a gift from God, that God gave me the gift to be able to create a story. I remember somebody asked me one time, they're like, what would make you different than another writer? Writers write stories. And I said, for me personally, I think my top skill is to be able to create a story. You give me an idea and my mind can just run with the story of the ideal that started off. And so I think I really have a passion to just focus in on a story, tell a good story. Out of my 15 books, they're like dealing with domestic violence was my very first book. I have a thriller. I have a how to self-publish booklet. I have a book that deals with sex and relationships. I have an erotic comedy book. I have all kind of different stories. I never stayed in one genre because I just figured I'd talk about whatever was on my mind, what I was going through at the time. And so I just kind of wrote on how I was feeling at that moment or something that I thought was a necessary subject to cover. So I just feel like that's my gift. I can take a story or an idea. I can take an idea and make it into a story, whether it's a real book or not. I can take a book that's not real, fiction, and make it so that you believe it. You believe the character, you believe into what you just read, and I try to make it so that when I write my stories, that the reader is locked in the beginning, because as what a lot of writers or people will tell you, if you don't capture your audience in the very beginning, then you'll lose them, so you got to make sure that you capture them in the beginning. But to go back, I think it was back in 2000, I think, when I wrote my very first story for a local newspaper, precinct reporter in San Bernardino, California. Thank you guys for your first opportunity to see what maybe I didn't even see in myself as far as creating. And I remember I wrote a story called Mean Moms, and the editor is like, why are you writing about mean moms? And I was like, well, when I grew up, my mom was really, really strict on me, and I always thought she was mean, and so I used to hate it because she wouldn't let me hang out with my friends. I see some of my friends over there, they could hang out at nighttime. They could, have boyfriends and do crazy things. And my mom was like, nope, you ain't doing that. Don't even think about it. So I was like, she's mean. She don't let me do what all the other girls were doing and the other people were doing. And so when I wrote my story, it's not my personal story, me and my mom, but it's just a story of where other, teenagers or whatever, they think their parents are mean because they're trying to instill things for you that will make you a better individual. And so it was the interesting part about all of that is my mom being mean, protecting me from life and the things that I had no idea about. A lot of those friends that were out there partying and hanging out at night and doing this and doing that, a lot of those ended up on drugs, alcohol, in jail, or dead, And so when I wrote that story, it was kind of like a thank you, because, when you're growing up, you just think your parents are being mean, but in most cases, they just want you to be protected and they want you to be a better individual. So that was my first story. And I must have did, at least 3-4 edits, 5 back and forth. And I guess the editor, he's maybe trying to, you can't do this, it ain't right. But he kept working with me. Okay, keep trying. Okay, you need to tweak this, you need to tweak that. And I was so into, I got to prove this. I got to prove to him that I could do it. I got to prove it. And I just kept following what he told me to do until he finally published my first story. And talk about proud. Oh my God, I was so proud. I made a whopping $10. And it wasn't about the money at all. It was just that I seen my name in print. And it was something that I didn't even realize that I had the talent, the ability to even do. So it opened up that can of worms for me. And then I just kept writing for the newspaper. And then after a while, I didn't really feel that writing for newspaper was my strength, journalism. So I got into writing for magazines. And I got into magazines because I could be a little more freer. I can be a little more, light and loose with my story and have fun with it. Instead of in journalism, you got to really stick to exactly the facts. You're supposed to at least stick to the facts. You're not supposed to have an opinion of the story. You're just supposed to tell the facts. And at least with magazine, I was able to kind of put some of me into it, a little bit on how I thought. You stick to the facts, but you're able to put a little bit of your personality into it. So I started doing that. And then, so I did that for a while. And then after a while, the internet started taking over. So therefore, I got less and less jobs as a freelancer because, like say, I wrote for Billboard magazine and Upscale magazine. I have like over 350 bylines throughout the United States and Canada. But after a while, those jobs started decreasing because people didn't need to pay the extra money to have advertisement done in newspapers and magazines. They could do it themselves because now the internet was getting bigger and better, and so people were like, well, we don't have to spend it on magazines and stuff, so we'll do it ourselves. So it started taking away jobs as freelancers. So because my passion was still into writing, I got into writing books because I like to talk. I am a talker. Those of you that know me, you know that. Anyway, so I started writing books. And I just my very first story, let's go backwards a little bit, is I wrote a short story. So when I was first introduced really to writing, I remember watching a TV show, Sally Jesse Raphael, and she interviewed Judith Krantz. And so she interviewed her. And I remember Judith saying, you never know what you can create until you put your mind to it. And I was like, okay, all right. And then I was like, what do I want to write about? I don't know. And so then I thought, well, I would like to eventually get paid as I write. So therefore, let's write about something that's dealing with sex. So I wrote my first short story as a romance story. And so I remember this day so clearly. My husband took myself and my two sons up in the mountains so that they can go fishing. And so my youngest son was still in his car seat, and he had fell asleep in the car. So my husband took my older son down and they went to the lake to go fishing. And I said, I'll just sit in here while he sleeps and write. And I remember, my hardest part too is where to start. So I figured out where I wanted to start and I just started writing, and I just wrote pencil and paper, just writing. And I just couldn't seem to get the words out fast enough for what was in my brain creating this story. And I just wrote, and it was just like, the more I wrote, the more I enjoyed writing, and the more creative I found that my thoughts were in creating this story and making it a real story, even though it wasn't based on a real story. And so I remember I wrote it, put it down, came back maybe a week later, revisited it, wrote it some more, tweaked it, put it down, came back a couple weeks later, same thing, until I felt like, okay, I'm ready. So it ended up being a 10-page short story. And I remember driving down the freeway. My husband was driving, I was in the car, and I read him some of the book, some of the story, one of the juicy scenes. And he turned around and looked at me and he's like, who have you been with? Nobody. My mind. It's my imagination. Who knows? I guess it was something inside me that I didn't even know what was inside of me. And so then my auntie came up one time from San Diego and I let her read the story. And we lived up north. And so after she read it, she's like, I got to go home. This story's got me hot and bothered. So it was at those moments that I realized I'm onto something. And I really enjoyed it. And I just kept writing and kept writing more. And then, like I say, with the newspaper, when I seen my name in print, it just validated, that I have a gift from God, that I say in my writing. And then I got into the magazine where I can be more creative in writing. And then I started getting into the books because I had more to say. My first story was actually a screenplay. My first book was called Mama, Please Forgive Me. And I wrote the screenplay first. Had no idea how to write a screenplay. I just figured I'd try it, so I tried it out. And I couldn't get all the feelings out on what I was trying to say in this story. So then I wrote the book after I finished the screenplay. And by the time I finished the whole book and, got it out there and I put it all together, friends donated money toward my birthday because one of my girlfriends, Harriet, and my husband had gotten together, went through my phone book and snail mailed everybody something that said, in lieu of her birthday, can you, donate money because she wants to publish her first book. And so started getting all these checks. They got all these checks and stuff in the mail, put them together. And that was my birthday present. And we put the additional money together. And I printed Mama, Please Forgive Me. I had 1,000 copies printed. And man, just the joy of seeing all those books with my name on it. And I had a high school student who actually did the cover, and he ended up using it in his art class and got credit. I was able to finish the book, and as he finished the cover, and he got credit in school. So it was a whole journey, but it was so worth it, just the joy of opening up a box of books that have your name on it. And it was just like, oh, so I was hooked by then to keep doing it. So I kept writing books, and I'd say my books deal with all kind of subjects. I didn't want to lock myself in one genre. So just kind of wrote what I felt, wrote what was on my mind, wrote what was interesting to me. And then sometimes just wrote stuff just because it was fun. I mean, like, who writes erotic comedy? I didn't even know I was funny until I wrote that book. Found myself laughing out loud when I was reading that book. And then the funny part about that is, like, my boys were still young. And so when I was writing that book and some of the romance stories in some of my other books, because I seem to put romance in quite a few of my books. There was always like a romantic scene or two or three in most of my books. And then when I wrote the erotic comedy, so it's like every time I was writing books, when I got to the romantic part or whatever, or the romantic books that I was doing, and I noticed that my husband kind of made sure that the boys were like away, because I guess he benefited later. But anyway, it just reinforced my passion for writing, my love to be able to, my gift and love to be able to create a story and make people believe it, whether it was, true or false, to tie in with the characters. I always believe, and other writers will probably tell you too, that if you don't catch your audience in the beginning, you lose them. So I always made it a really important step to make sure that as my readers are reading my books, that they get locked into the story right in the beginning. And so, because if they didn't, then they would not continue reading the rest of the book. And so I remember my very first book, Mama, Please Forgive Me. And I would go to book clubs and have meetings with them and talk about the book and explain how I, came up with the idea of the book and everything. And I remember a lady, she was like, your book, it started off with just a bang. And most writers, they let theirs just kind of go like smoothly and then climax and come down. She said, but yours started off with a climax. So she's like, that's not really how most writers write. And I looked at her and I said, tell me this. I said, did it catch your attention as you read it? She said, yes. I said, in the beginning, it caught your attention. Yes. Okay. Did you keep reading it because of the introduction on how the book started off? Did you keep reading to see what else was going to happen? She said, yes. I said, point proven. That's what I was trying to do. I was trying to reel you in the beginning, have you hooked on the opening part of the story, and then keep you going as you read the rest of the book. So that was really, fun to be able to do that. And like I say, I've written several books that, deal with all kind of different genres, and just depended on how I felt. People would ask me, how did you get started with writing, or what, how do you write a story? We get plenty of people to ask me, how do you even write a story? Where do you begin? And so I would tell them, depends on what the subject is, what you're talking about. As Michael Jordan made it so clear and widely known, just do it. If you want to talk about your life story, start when you were a baby, because I believe that you need to show a little bit about where you started from. And this is what any book, if you're going to talk about your life or your path to something, where did it start from? So start from that base, whether it's your childhood or in the beginning on what the story is about. Start from your base. Don't give too much information because you don't want to make it boring when you haven't even gotten to the facts of the meat of the story. So just introduce people a little bit on who you are and how you got there so that they'll have some knowledge of it, and then lead them up into the story. That's one way of doing it. Another way is some of my stories come in, as that lady was saying, with a bang, so it may have not been the lead up, but it was the part that hooked the reader from the first few pages. And so that's another attempt, that you can come in like that. It just depends on you as an individual, where you're going with the story, where you want to end with the story. I remember my second book, which is a sequel to Mama, Please Forgive Me, is called Mind Games. I remember after I finished with Mama, Please Forgive Me, I wrote the intro to Mind Games and the ending of Mind Games. And then I came back later on when I was ready to address that book and wrote the meat of the book in the inside, but I knew where I wanted to start and where I wanted to end. And for me personally, starting has always a more difficult process than, later on. If I know where I'm going to start at, then once I get started, then my mind will just create the rest as I go along. And people have also asked me about writer's block. I personally never said that I had writer's block, because I learned over a period that if you're not feeling it, don't write. Because when I would try to write, when I wasn't really feeling it, I'd just be sitting there twiddling at the typewriter and just trying to figure out, what do I want to say? How do I want to say it? And then I'd get ready to read it, and half of the time it didn't make sense. And it was just such a waste of time whereas when I felt like I was in the mood to write, it would just go so much more freely, and I had made a commitment to myself that I would write at least 4 days out of 7, even if that was 10 minutes. And a lot of times when I started with that 10 minutes, I'd be there for an hour or two. And so it just depended on how the story was going, how I was feeling, and just kind of made it my own. But like I said, when I didn't feel like writing, didn't feel it, I just didn't do it because it didn't come out right. And then when I would go back and edit my books, I remember, especially with my first book, I'd read some of it and I'm like, wow, I don't even remember creating that particular portion of the story. And I just kind of would look up to God and say, God gave me that idea. He told me where to take this story. He gave me the knowledge to be able to create and come up with something. And my first story, Mama, Please Forgive Me, deals with domestic violence. And I remember trying to figure out, do I write or do I write a romance story for the first book that I'm going to put out? Because I kind of had wrote a little bit of both of them. And then I decided to do the domestic violence, even though I knew that that's not an easy subject to deal with. My mom was a victim of domestic violence. And so I know that that wasn't a story that was easy to tell. It wasn't her story. But what I realized, and I didn't realize this until the book was completely finished, is that the little girl in the story, the 5-year-old, was actually me as a 5-year-old witnessing my mother being abused by my stepfather and not being able to help her. So as I wrote that, I realized it was feelings that were inside of me that I had held on to since I was 5 years old until I became an adult, And so I learned that my books also was a therapy for me, because as I wrote that story from the brain and the mind and the heart of a 5-year-old, it allowed me to get it out of my system, the memories and the feelings that I had obviously held on to and didn't even realize that I was holding on to them until I started writing. So my writing has, like I say, it has been not only my passion, it also a lot of times has been very therapeutic for me. And I've been able to sometimes analyze myself or understand maybe a situation that I was going through or I've been through or why things happened. I was able to analyze sometime what was really going on in the inside by writing it on paper. So anyway, I just, again, thank God that I had the gift. It is definitely my passion. I remember, at one point getting frustrated because I published my books. And when I say publish, I'd make sure the cover was created. I would make sure, like, if you pick up a book and read it, like with these, the layout, I had to put the whole layout together so that what you see is what I did on the computer to put the whole layout together. Then I sent it to a publishing company that back in those days, I printed my very first book, 1,000 copies. So I say my husband and my girlfriend sent mail to people saying she wants to write, support her by donating money so that she could publish her first book. And like I say, the checks were coming in. We still had to add more money to it, but it blew my mind on how some of my friends and family would donate. They may have only had $5. They donated it, $50, $100, and everything helped because it was very expensive to print up 1,000 books. I did a whole layout and everything, but to print them out, it was very expensive for us back then. We didn't have a lot of money. And so just to see that so many people believed in me, even sometime more than I believed in myself, kept me writing and kept me doing and kept me believing in myself when, like I say, sometimes I couldn't even, believe in myself. And it was at those sometimes some books later that I, would put my books out and trying to sell them. And, they in the backseat of my car, my trunk. And the first one, I'm like going to everybody. I mean, I'd go to the post office, the grocery store, and people that I had friended in the grocery store, the post office, or the bank, or whatever. I'd take my book. Here, buy my book. It's only $10. Support me. And a lot of people supported me. I got on different shows where people interviewed me. I put it out there. It was in Barnes and Noble. I really pushed that first one a lot. It was great. Now things are a little more difficult. You can't necessarily get in bookstores so easily unless you're a big celebrity or you've had a history of selling a lot of product, along the way. So those things are a lot different from when I started off, but, still have my passion. I still do the writing. And when I got to those points in my life and my career as a writer, that I just was like, man, nobody's buying my stuff. I should just stop writing. And, but I was, my husband was a big supporter for me. He's like, keep writing. The money will come eventually. Don't write for the money, write because that's what you love to do. We'll take care of everything else. So, I owe him a lot of kudos for always pushing me and encouraging me, and then, like I say, the different publications that would publish, publicly that would put my stories out, that would allow me to write for them, and that would give me the chances of writing, So with the 350 bylines that I had with Billboard and Upscale and different ones all over the United States and Canada, it was an honor that these people allowed me to work for them and doing something that I loved. That's the part that was the greatest, is that I loved doing what I loved. So anyway, just wanted to say, those of you that may be interested in writing, I just say, just do it. That's what I did. Figure out where you want to start, what you want to write about. Sometimes people would come to me and want me to write their stories, but it's so time consuming. And by the time I tell them what I would charge, they're like, So I'm like, the more you can do for yourself, the less you have to pay somebody else to do. So that's why I learned how to do a lot of stuff myself, is because I'm like, I'd rather do it, learn it, and then pay myself. So all of my books, my 15 books, are available on Amazon.com. I've been doing some book signings and going to be doing some more in the local Southern California area, San Diego, Riverside County areas, doing book signings because people are asking for copies of my book for me to autograph them. So I'm going to be doing more book signings and stuff. And some of them are going to be wineries or just different locations. I'm just kind of scouting out different locations and doing different ones. So anyway, I would say if you guys have a passion or you think that you have a passion for writing, just do it. You just, as Judith says, you never know what you can do until you put your mind to it. And now, of course, we have AI programs. So a lot of people are going that direction. I'm old fashioned. I just like to just write. I don't want to see what AI has to say. I just like to let my own mind create, because AI can be good. I won't knock that. But for me, I rather just be creative in my own self. Now, I have used AI sometime for some of my editing. On this last book, I remember I had done like 100 pages, and then I put it into AI, asked them to edit it. And man, they must have brought it down to like 40 pages. I was like, I needed that information in there. Why you take it out? So I was like, forget AI. So I started back from my original one and just edited myself. And I've had some of my friends who are into reading a lot, or they like English. I've had them help me with the editing because, I need other eyes besides myself to look at the words that I have. And there was another editing program that I've used too, Grammarly. That was a good one that I used, and that one really helped, find a lot of things that I needed. So, you just use the different tools that work for you. You bring out what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and even if it doesn't sell any books, if it's something that makes you proud, if it's your passion, something you feel like you need to get it out, just do it. It can be just to help you on a therapeutical level. Sometimes we just need to write stuff to get it out of our system so that our brain is not holding on to it. That's how I felt with my first one. You get it out of your system, and then you feel like it's somewhere safe. You don't have to keep holding on to those thoughts and those memories, and especially if they're not happy ones. You bring them out, and it helps you to heal, which is what happened for me. So anyway, I just want to remind you guys, get my book, Behind the Scenes, Celebrity Life Behind the Scenes, 50 stories of me and celebrities. Like some of these celebrities, like I say, some of the stories are like a few paragraphs. Some may be several pages. Like say my chapter that I have on Earth, Wind, and Fire. My husband worked for them for about 12 years. So I got the opportunity to go on tour with them, and I was Philip Bailey's babysitter when the kids were little. Me and his wife were best friends, and so got to hang out with them and, go to family functions. Sometimes we'd have Christmas and Thanksgiving dinners together. In the summertime, I'd go on the tour bus and I'd travel with them. So I talk about some of those stories on what I went through and the joy and the honor and the privilege that I had to be able to hang with these celebrities like that, because a lot of celebrities don't always allow the families or spouses or whatever to travel with them. And so it was an honor and blessing. I got to just see the world sometime through the eyes of other people and their world, and see their world. And I would notice that when I'd come back sometime from these tours, it would inspire me to want to be creative and write more. So then another book would come out of it. So anyway, so that chapter is a little longer. It's more pictures in it because I had more of a interaction with Earth, Wind, and Fire, their members and family members. We'd have lunch and dinner together. I mean, just all kind of stuff. So the stories are just fun stories. They're real stories, plenty of pictures. If you get the ebook, you also see the color pictures. So the ebook and the hardcover have color pictures, and the paperback is the one that has just the black and white pictures. But anyway, if you want to be a writer, just do it. If you want to get in touch with me, you can email me at talkswithtoy@aol.com. I'm old school. Keep it real. Keep it simple. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so if you want to ask me some more questions, or if you're interested in some of my book signings, you can go to toymoore.com. That's TLIMOORE.com. I'm going to start putting more information on there about my upcoming book signings. We just updated my website because I haven't even been on my website lately. So we just recently redid it and updated it and stuff. So now I got to go on there and add in my dates and stuff. But yeah, you can go to toymoore.com and read more about me, some of my background, my history, see what my other books are about. And I'll also go to amazon.com. They're all available. Usually they're the ebooks and the paperbacks. Some of the paperbacks I notice aren't available now because they were so old, so long ago that I wrote them. But anyway, hope you guys go on and join in with what I'm doing. Support is great. I love the support that I'm already getting. I'm getting a lot of support for this book, and it's starting to make a lot of noise. So I'm really excited about that. And I look forward to what you guys think about it, about the books. Let me know your thoughts on if you're interested in writing, if you have questions. If you go to my website too, I also publish other people's books. We have a breakdown, I think, on what I would do for publishing, or either you can just send me a message and We can talk about what your project is about, and I can offer publishing services as well. But anyway, again, you can reach me, talkswithtoy@aol.com. Go to toymore.com and check me out, and buy my books on amazon.com. All you have to do is put books by Toy Moore, and all my books will start coming up. So thank you for tuning in. I hope this was a great informational session for you guys to learn about being a writer, or at least how I started and what has worked for me and what I've been doing with my writing. And look forward to seeing and talking to you guys soon. So you have a good day. Thank you. Bye.
PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.